and I feel a very close affinity with the Moraga Fire Department because Moraga's Fire Department introduced us to the town. It was back, I think, in 1958. When we lived as newcomers to Northern California in Concord, and we saw a movie playing at the Rheem Theater. And so we looked at the map and were able to somehow locate where Rheem was and got a babysitter and took off. And in my great sense of direction, I went from Concord to Orinda and came down Moraga Highway. And I didn't see a thing. Not a thing. It was dark. And all of a sudden there was a little light. And it was the fire department. I pulled in and I said, where are we and where is the Rheem Theater? And so very kindly they directed us to the Rheem Theater. I don't even remember what the movie was. I think it was Birth of a Nation or something like that. That was our introduction.
It wasn't Humphrey Bogart.
Might have been. One other little anecdote that Maggie Skinner gave me. Our former fire chief, Skinner, and Maggie had kind of an indirect relationship because every time she went into the Moraga cleaners, she said, I'd like my cleaning, my name is Skinner, out would come the chief's uniforms. So when he retired, that problem ended. My job tonight is very easy. I have to introduce a very prominent and lovely resident of Moraga, Gerry Mazaika, and otherwise Mrs. Mike Mazaika. Gerry's family has been in this area since 1916. Mike has been in the area since the mid-30s, and as many of you know, was an outstanding football player at St. Mary's. Gerry's father, Alfred Carr, came here in 1916 and joined in partnership with Frank Sanders.
Did he?
Okay. I'll turn it off, sorry. And also, as I hope Gerry will tell you a little about, their son Steve Mazaika is now a Moraga fireman and has been one since age 16 on a part-time basis, is now a full-time Moraga fireman. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce Gerry Mazaika.
Well, our son, that's our second son, Steve, always wanted, since a little boy, wanted to be a fireman. And so he used to relieve, vacation relief during his vacation from high school. He loved it. And eventually he became a regular fireman when he was 21. And he no sooner became a regular fireman when a couple months later he was drafted. But he came back and he likes being a fireman. And now I'd like to introduce you to Chief Ed Lucas. And I've known Ed for many years.
I stand here. I don't have to stand over the
Oh,
phone.
you stand anywhere you want to.
Okay. Well, you know, before I start this, we're here tonight in Moraga, history of the Moraga Fire Department. I'd like to talk to him about Gerry's son, Steve. It goes way back because I've been in the fire service 30 years. And I used to see this little twerp wander down with his grandfather and his father, Al Card. Gerry's father was very prominent in the fire service in the years past. And little Steve was always there. He was under your feet, a little rug rat. He grew up, he went to Acalanes High School, and at that time they were living in Lafayette, and every time you turn around, Steve was there. He turned 16, he started in the volunteer program, and he loved the service. When he hit 21, at that time, it was Al Baitx was our boss, and he hired Steve. And as soon as he hired Steve, Vietnam came along, and we had to have a party for Steve, a going away party, September 28th, 19 I have to figure out how old my son is, because this is the whole part of the story. My son's 23, so we'll go back 23 years. We had the party up at a fellow fireman's home, a gentleman by the name of Lou Mazzano. Party was going great, but right in the middle of it, my wife ended up in labor pains. I ended up in the hospital, and we had a son. We named him Steve. And Steve spent 2 years in Nam, came back. He's been a firefighter with us since. He's one of our better firefighters. He's a senior fireman, and I hope in the near future he will be captain. He's one of several local residents who grew up in the area, and I'll discuss that a little later on. But I just had to talk about Steve because he's one of my favorite firefighters, because I've seen him grow up, really. Okay, what is the Moraga Fire Service, and where did it start? Well, actually, it had a very humble beginning. June 12, 1946, the Board of Supervisors of Contra Costa County realized there was a large area in the county that had no fire protection. It was areas that extended from the city, from Orinda to Pittsburgh and Antioch. There was big areas in a big swath of areas where nobody wanted the fire protection because there was no money. There was no tax money. It was all open land. So that year, and that date, they established the Eastern Contra Costa Fire Protection District. It was all areas in the eastern part of Contra Costa County that were not under a fire district. It covered 216 square miles, 1/3 of the county. So I say it started where Orinda is now. It used to be known as the Orinda Crossroads, where it was just a crossroads. It was a couple stop signs and a bar and a grocery store, Bradley store. And everything from that point clear to Pittsburgh and Antioch was the Eastern Contra Costa Fire District. It went out, went around Danville, it covered San Ramon Village, Tassajara, Marsh Creek, and over in Antioch and Pittsburgh, 216 square miles. They had a district. How do you protect the district? Well, their answer came that they had the farmers in the area. They bought 7 Jeeps, 1946, 45, 46 Jeeps, a couple surplus Jeeps, put 100 gallons of water on the Jeeps, and this was our first fire protection in the area. It was all volunteer. They had one fire chief at that time. I think he got $50 a month. His name was Gerry Gill, and this goes back years. He was the owner of the Marsh Creek Springs, which at that time was a big area there for picnics and so forth. And he was the fire chief. He had control of the whole areas. Each area they had their own volunteer group. In our area, we had a very active group of 25 volunteers. Al Carr, Jerry's father, was one of the original volunteers. His brother Sam Carr, John Sanders, Frank Sanders, Manuel Nez, worked Moraga Land Company. Bill Barnes was an unofficial volunteer. He didn't do much, but he was there. He donated lots for the district. Art Flutie, you all know Art. Any of you people that know Art, you've got a smile on your face because he was a great person. He'd do anything for you. Let's see, Tom Carroll was one of the original volunteers. And there were many others. As the time went on, the area changed, and the volunteers went from the ranchers to suburbians. We had Dick Irving, Ernie Series, and lots of the Jack Winthers. We used to be a postman in the area. It changed. But the original group were all ranchers. They had very concern. They had many fires in the area. Till that time, if you had a fire, you had to call the Rheem Fire Department. And they'd come out clear from down the Orinda Village to fight fires. Well, you were losing many, many acres of grazing land, and that was their livelihood. So we did have a volunteer fire department, and that same year, Bill Barnes donated our first fire station. I'll show you a picture here. It's in your book. It's on the wall. There's lots of unknowns about it. Some say the building was built there just for the fire station. Others say it was an old feed storage area, and I think that was probably the truth. Because when I went in there in '59, the floor was concrete in there. You could see where stalls had been and so forth. But whatever the case may be, we did have a fire station. We didn't have a pumper. We had one Jeep and an old crash vehicle in it. And this was the fire department. How did it work? Well, if there was a fire, the ranchers would have to go down to the station, blow the large siren on the top of the station, and that's how the volunteers were called. Some were called by phone, but basically it was a situation where somebody had to go to the station, push the switch and blow the siren, get the volunteers, and go by the Moraga barn. That was a priority. I learned that when I came on in '59. You go by the Moraga barn and pick up help, and you went to fight the fire. I didn't see how this got true. But anyway, we did have volunteers, and it went along very well. And something about, you have to realize in those years, the volunteers were a very social group. Realize this area was small. According to our records, in 1954, there were only 254 residents in the valley. So it was a small group of people. They were very tightly knit, and the volunteers gave them as social aspects. They had many dances. Gerry can talk about dances at the old Moraga school. Barbecues. If you needed meat, you just went out and picked up a deer somewhere. Cars had deer, so let's just leave it at that. You'd have nice venison barbecue. And you had a great time. And then they had their annual parties. Later on, the Carroll Ranch, that probably most of you have never seen, it was a real nice place when Tom Carroll came in. The parties were held there, and it was a priority that the fire chief always ended up in the swimming pool, clothes and all. But it was there. Dave Freitas usually ended up in there too. How many of you remember Dave? That was before. Dave was a very interesting man. He was an honorary volunteer. But the community rotated around this group of people, and it was fun. And there's stories we can't talk about that happened with that group. But it was a great group, and as I say, that was a community organization. This went on pretty well until 1950. It was just strictly volunteers. 1950, 2 incidents happened that realized that things had to change a little. The area was starting to grow. There was talk of growth. That particular year, there was a home on Camino Pablo, Alexander's home residence, that caught fire. Everybody ran for the fire truck, which was an old crash vehicle, and a Jeep wouldn't start. It was seen last it was seen, 4 volunteers were pushing it down the street. It never got to the fire. It was dead battery, had problems with it. That was the first incident. Second incident, alongside the firehouse on 1000 School Street, which is now a novelty shop, there used to be a second cookhouse, and it burnt down right alongside the firehouse. People said, wait a second, we've got a problem. That year they decided, and they met with these volunteers and Gerry's dad and her brother and the group, went over, met with Gerry Gill and said, hey look, we've got a community here, we're paying taxes, we see a future growth, we want something better than what we have. That year they hired their first employee. His name was Al Baitx, later became chief. He was a resident of Moraga. He lived on which is now Baitx Drive. He was working in Oakland as a delivery of a florist shop. He didn't know a damn thing about the fire service, but he had a heart as big as gold. Anybody who knows Al, he'd do anything for you. He took over the job in 1950. He was the first employee. And his job was basically make sure that darn truck started. I mean, it was a 1941 crash truck. In fact, I'll pass one of the few pictures we got of the original building as it looked with the 2 vehicles in it, 1941 Army crash truck and the Jeep. And his job was, if there was a fire, from 8 to 5 he worked at the fire station. At night he went home and he had a phone at home. And if a call came in at night, he drove down to the fire station, blew the siren, and then the volunteers would come. During the day, he was on the scene. He was driving that Jeep that shows in that picture, and he had a radio in it. We had communications with the sheriff's office at that time. And that was the first start of the fire service. Al did an excellent job. He really did for what he had. He put up with lots of problems, lots of political problems, because nobody wanted to spend money in the county level. They wanted the ranchers to put it up, yet the ranchers were the ones paying the taxes, supporting the county. It's the same old thing. But it went that way for quite a while. And then in 1952, we hired our second employee, John Huff, later become Captain Huff and retired and still lives on Larch Avenue. Again, he worked during the day. It was a situation The area wasn't that large, but there was need. And the fire service, I think you're all very aware of, even then, fires were just part of our problem. Public service was a bigger part. From medical help, any type of first aid situation, to helping 4-H people deliver sheep, as I did one day when I first started. A little girl called, Wendy was her name, and her what's a female sheep called? Hugh was having babies, and there were problems, so the fire service ended up over there delivering sheep. I mean, we were there. We were the only people in the area. So we
You know how to
knew.
do that? You learned.
So we learned. But we were there for all types of things. What you have to realize, this time in the community, it was very small. The station's still there. It was sitting there, but you have to realize Moraga Road is where Viator Street is now. You know, it was just 150 feet out from the fire station was Moraga Road. We went in front of the barn, made a sharp right turn, went another 200 yards, made another right turn, and you're on Canyon Road. That was really a sobriety drug test of the community. If you can make those 2 turns to get home, you're okay. We had many accidents in here. Moraga Road used to come there, and as I say, it was just past the firehouse. It was a dead end. There was no lights. There was no shopping center. People would come down Moraga Road. It's a straight road, and they just keep going. They end up in the ditch. We go pull them out, send them home, sober them up, and send them home. That was the community, and it was great. It really was. I mean, I've seen it change so much, and I'm not saying it's not great now. It's a great community to live, but it was a different atmosphere, and everything was built around the fire service and the Moraga Community Club in those days. That went on, and then in 1953 we hired our 3rd employee, and we started our first 24-hour shift. We had 3 people, so we worked on and off. They worked 90 hours a week. They get paid $210 a month, big money in those days. And we had 1 person on 24 hours a day. 1954 was the first year we bought our first pumper, as it's shown in the pictures. In 1953 GMC, and the area started to grow. We had the start of the Ivy Drive area. I'm going to go back a little. I missed one area here. Originally I said we went clear to the Orinda Crossroads, Highway 24 as we know it now. But as the area grew out that way in the late 48s and the early 50s, we lost area because we didn't have a full-time fire department. So it was always annexed into Orinda. Came all the way to that point until the early 50s, and Ivy Drive, we had our own fire service, and that's why we go to Ivy Drive. We go out of city limits of Moraga, but that became the growing line, the line. From then on, we held our own. But up until that point, every time something was developed, El Camino Moraga, Glorieta, then it was annexed into Orinda because they had a fire district. Same thing happened with the postal district. We didn't have a post office delivery service, so when something was developed, it was put in the Orinda Postal District because they had delivery service. So we started losing area. So in 1954, we did hire, 53, excuse me, we hired personnel, and then we had our first real pumper. And I'm really open to any questions, please. I'm trying to cover this on anything you would like to ask, please. As I mentioned before, we had approximately 254 people in the valley then. The Rheem Center had started. Mr. Rheem had started his expansion up there, and his estate and his maintenance yard up on the hill. And so the growth had started. It started slow, very slow. Again, we were still the Eastern Contra Costa Fire Protection District. And with that, there were some very political problems that we will cover here in a minute. But Mr. Rheem came along and he says, hey, I've got a center. As you probably heard before, he had a post office there and he wanted to know it was Rheem, California. And he donated a piece of property. He wanted a fire station. He donated a property, and we built a fire station up there with one stipulation. And it just saying Rheem Valley Fire Station. And it was a $47,000 fire station built in 1946. Built a beautiful station in 1946, opened the front doors, and didn't have a fire truck for it. Planning. Fire truck was bought in 57, a year later. Our gentleman by the name of Lou Mazaika, who was since retired, was the first firefighter up there. He says, I was in there for 2 weeks, and I walked in, and introduced, Al had hired him, he walked in, he came up the morning to start, July 1st, looked around, here's a beautiful engine room, not a damn thing. He says, what do you do? He says, what am I to do up here? He says, answer the phone. He answered the phone, he cleaned that engine room twice a day, he cleaned corners, and that second week they brought the Jeep up from the other station, and that was his fire truck. It was a very interesting time, really. I mean, you laugh about it now. The following year, they did buy a brand new fire truck in 1957, 56 International, it was 57 before they got it. It was a great truck. Then we had a fire truck up there with one individual. One fireman in a fire truck doesn't make a fire company. So after some consideration, both ends, they decided that we should have, from 7 p.m. until 7 a.m., we'll bring a sleeper in. So they hired people from Brother Dennison's College, St. Mary's there, and to work 12-hour shifts. They were paid $5 a night. They had a place to sleep. So during those hours, we had 2 people on duty. And that's how it really started, and it was lots of interesting times. Volunteers were still very strong. We had parties at the news station, and things we did that today make me shudder now. I mean, it was nothing to have a beautiful spaghetti feed up there and go through 10 or 15 gallons of wine in a county public building and never think anything of it. And you'd end up not only with the volunteers, you'd end up with other people. You'd have 50, 60 people to one of these fairs. It was a community organization. After you get down there, Art says, let's go down to the barn, and everybody ended up down to the barn. It was a very, Gerry can tell you about that. I'm not saying Gerry was in the barn. But it was a lot of fun, and the area was growing. With the growth came changes, some good, some bad. 1958, we started our Christmas program. We felt we wanted to get a little more contact with the community, so that year we had our first Santa Claus. We put the Santa Claus in a Jeep. We had a gentleman by the name of Harry Rohr, which Rohr Drive in Lafayette is named after. He was one of the volunteers. He was also president of White Candy, excuse me. First year he donated 200 candy canes. The Jeep of Santa went around and toured the area, blew the siren, the kids came out, gave them candy canes. Very community oriented. When the program ended in 1968, we had 4 Jeeps and 4 Santa Clauses and went through better than 2,000 candy canes. We just community outgrew the program, but it was fun. It was really a great thing to do. The kids enjoyed it. We've gone back to the open house concept to bring the kids back on the fire station. Santa, in that time, it brought the kids around. It brought young Steve around. It brought Mike Mazaika. His parents owned the Moraga grocery store. Kazar, excuse me, pardon me. Mick Kazar. His parents owned the Moraga grocery store, the original Safeways of the community. They lived in the back of it. And Mike came around the fire station. Today he's a captain in Moraga Fire. Same as Steve, he worked around there. We couldn't get rid of him, so we hired him. And they're great people because they grew up in the area and they appreciate the area. But things started to change with the other fire station. Scott and Ball came and built on the original homes on Rheem Boulevard. The area started to grow. With that came more people. And then we ran into a little problem, political problem. We were still known as Eastern Contra Costa Fire Protection with the Rheem Valley Fire Station in it, but we wanted more. And the other areas of the community at that time, we had a tax rate of 25 cents, and the community wanted to raise their taxes to have fire protection because the area was growing. We had Ivy Drive by then. We had a good portion of Rheem Boulevard already in and over the hill. So we ended up in that's what happens after 30 years, you forget the days. 1959, we ended up as division of Eastern Contra Costa Fire District. We ended up in the Moraga division, and we had a tax rate of 88 cents, and the rest of the rancher area had a tax rate of 25 cents. With that differential, we were able to hire people. I was the 8th person hired in the district, and I came in May of '59. The following year we hired 4 people. And that's really when the fire department really started to take a hold. Chief Baitx became assistant fire chief, because Gerry Gill was still sitting there with the big white hat on, even though Al was the assistant fire chief, he was the chief here. County title was assistant fire chief, but he was our chief, and he was treated as a chief. And then in July 1st, 1967, Moraga came out on our own. We became a separate fire district. We are a county fire district. Our official title is the Moraga Fire District of Contra, Costa County. We're one of 5 county fire protection districts. Al was made our official chief. We had 2 fire stations. We had some pretty good equipment. That's because of the people in the area felt it was needed. And the area was growing. And from 67, we went pretty well status quo. 1968, Al retired. He hit the age of 60. It was mandatory retirement. He retired out of there. And we ended up with a captain from the Consolidated Fire District as our new fire chief. His name was Don Skinner. One hell of a good man. He's what the community needed. He was a very progressive fire chief. He came aboard in 1968. Things started to change. We became a professional service. I'm not saying we weren't a service before, but we made radical changes in the next few years. Just to cover a few, we had one dark area. That was 1969. The board, because of certain politics, the Board of Supervisors say, hey, you're no longer Moraga Fire District. You're part of Consolidated Fire Districts. We, by action of the Board of Supervisors, for 1 week, we were members of the Consolidated Fire District. They annexed us in. Politically, they could. They're still our bosses today. Politically, they thought they could. The people of Moraga went bananas. They asked for a vote, and the commission said, if you have a vote, you have to have a petition. They put a petition together, and it was something like 87% of the people asked for a vote to decide their own issue. They had the election, and it was something like 90% voted out of consolidation, and we were back as Moraga Fire District. The best thing that ever happened for the community in the future, because we have things that the other areas in Contra Costa do not have. Okay, we went through this dark period of consolidation. After that, it was over with, it was done. 1970 came along, and we had something very interesting happen. It really changed the world, changed our perspective of the fire service. 1970, a gentleman by the name of Dick Kirsch had an accident. He was riding his kid's mini bike, fell off it, and split his leg open. Took out the artery. Gene called for an ambulance. 45 minutes later, the ambulance came. Came from Walnut Creek, took 45 minutes. They got him to the hospital, and his blood pressure was 0. They brought him back. He still limps around with a very bad leg. But the community and Gene and Gerry Meyer and a few other people in the community, this is Rice sitting back there, I think had something to do with it, said, hey, we need a medical service in the community. The area's growing. We need help. So they got together with the Moraga Service League and went door to door, raised $10,000 in about 3 to 4 weeks, went down and bought us our first ambulance. It was a 1970 Dodge van, and equipped it. And we started our basic medical service. Conditions were, on any life-threatening injury, we would transport. We couldn't transport for the cut fingers or things like that, but if there was a life-death type emergency, we transported. That could be a heart attack, it could be a broken leg, a broken arm, with problems involved, and we would transport. And that's how we started in the medical business. Now, that went along fairly well until 1977, when the same group said, hey, we want paramedics. 1977, they were on TV. Emergency 1, Rescue 1 in LA. Paramedic service came to LA. These same group of people say, why can't we have it? Well, to be very frank with you, we were very skeptical about going into the program, realizing the work that was involved and could we handle it. It was the best thing that ever happened to Moraga Fire District and the community. Same group got together, pushed some buttons politically. We were able to send 4 of our firefighters to St. Stanford, to the paramedic school there. They spent 6 months at school in Stanford. We had our first 4 paramedics. We had a brand new ambulance, 1977 ambulance. The ambulance alone equipped was $50,000. County paid for it. Moraga Fire became the second fire district in Northern California with paramedic service. The community of Compton beat us by 1 month. So we started our program. Since then, we are still the only paramedic firefighting organization in Costa County. Danville has paramedics, but they're supplied for John Muir Hospital. Well, we're the only ones in the county. With that came many changes in personnel, and all for the better. Paramedic service started, and immediately we saw that it was the best thing that happened. A couple things that happened with it, the caliber people we were getting were excellent. We decided after the first 4 that we were going to, rather than train paramedics, we were going out and steal them from private industry. It cost about $20,000 to train a paramedic, because you're paying the man's salary while he's at school, and you have to pay overtime to replace him. So it is a very expensive situation. So realizing this, and realizing that there's lots of great people, good qualified people out there, we from that point on, we've actually stolen from private industry. Gave us a couple advantages. First, we saw their track record. We won't take a paramedic unless he's been out in the public domain working for at least 3 years as a paramedic. There's lots of paramedics out there that we will not hire. We want qualified people. We go through, an example, I got yesterday, they had the agility test, and there was 47 people who took the agility test, and they were advised that we would probably hire 1 or 2 paramedics at the most. They all want to get into the program, and that's great. I'll go through all 47 names, because when the time comes, I'm going to find the 2 best out of that 47, and we're going to take them from private industry, and the guys are happy to come to the fire service. We work a 56-hour week. They're out there working a 72-hour week and not having the same living conditions we are. So that's why we got into the paramedic field, and it's been the best thing that's happened to us. We have our sad moments. I had a very sad moment tonight. On the way home, I got a call. 2 doors down from me, a very close friend of mine passed away, and we had to go on that. Those bother you. That's why Gerry Myers isn't here tonight. She was a very close friend of Jerry's. And those type hurt you, but we'd been at her house 3 other times in the last 6 months because of her illness, and we were able to help her. So there's lots of good things happening, there's lots of bad ones. We had a 74-year-old man 2 weeks ago, thanks to 3 of the local Moraga citizens, saved his life. He was jogging in the Rheem Center, and he pulled a full arrest, heart attack. We got there, 3 people were working on CPR, 2 nurses and a town employee, Steve Rotenkoper, were giving CPR. The individual lived. He passed away yesterday, but we gave him a chance that he wouldn't have had. Our paramedics got there, there was still no pulse or breathing. On the way into the hospital, we turned around. When we got to the emergency room at Kaiser, he was breathing and he lived a week. Most of those people that go in and get breathing, they walk out. People here, we know, people at San Rescue 1, Mr. Martin, we've been there twice. We've had another case where we actually zapped a person 11 times. And I left the area. It was a secretary's, Brother Mel's secretary, Brother Dennis knows her husband, Glenn, and he was zapped 11 times. I left there because we worked on 45 minutes and no results. The paramedics said we aren't going to give up. I went back and called my wife and told her you might want to go up and see Dorothy because she's going to need help. I was made a fool of. They got him to the hospital and walked out 3 weeks later and lived 7 more years. So those type of things really make it worthwhile. You know, we defibrillated him 11 times. He came in and he came by and thanked us. He's talking to me, he says, Andy, he says, I don't know, but he says, my chest is still sore. What's making it sore? He said, you got hit 11 times with electricity. He wasn't even aware of it. So it has the service has lots of good. You get lots of great feelings. You have your sad times. Okay. We went into the paramedic business under Chief Skinner's guidance. Now, we started with 4, now we have 13 paramedics, and we are running 2 ambulances. 1 full-time out of the station, the Rheem Station, and 1 90% of the time as the personnel are available out of the station, Rheem Station. What happens there, you won't see an ambulance, you'll see an engine company, a full squad. It's a paramedic with all the equipment aboard on that unit. We can't run a second ambulance out of there right now because of manning, but we can run a firefighter and paramedic and do the same thing, and that's why we're doing it that way. They won't let us run an ambulance with a paramedic and firefighter. We have to have 2 paramedics. With 13 paramedics on duty, you can't guarantee you're always going to have 4 on duty every day because they work on a shift basis. So we normally have at least 3, so we can run 1 up there with a firefighter. And it's usually a good firefighter, usually by the name of Mazaika. You can see he's well trained. So, all of our firefighters are EMT 1As. They're just 1 step below paramedics. We've got 27 people. 13 of those are paramedics, and the other ones are all EMT 1As. They go through a minimum of 2 full weeks training a year, and just on that one subject. That's an 8-hour class a day for 2 weeks. Keeps proficiency. Coming down here pretty good. Paramedic service went well, but at that time we didn't have any administration buildings. 1978, we had a set of plans for an administration building. We had a little problem. It's called money. We didn't have money to build one. We had a set of plans that were drawn up by the county, and I got a call one day from Chief Skinner was the chief, he was out. Bob Schroeder, at that time, who was our board of supervisors, says, hey, Ed, he says, you've got plans for an administration building there? He said, yeah. He said, I'd like you to submit it. There's a grant money available from President Carter at the time. It's called Public Assistance Grant Money. So I'd like you to submit the plan. And Bob, they aren't going to give Moraga public assistance. You know, we've got Richmond and everybody else out there. He says, submit it, see what happens. Well, we submitted our plans in 1978, forgot about them, you know. We figured we'd be down at the bottom of that list. The grant date expired, and I got a call the next morning. Schroeder says, you got an administration building. He says, you got $178,000 out of the county's $500,000. I said, how come? He says, nobody thought that they were qualified for it. And he says, all that was submitted was your proposal, $300,000 for San Ramon School District for fire alarms, and $50 for a generator. So I'm dumbfounded, you know. I said, how are we going to qualify? So we went to the federal meetings, and we qualified. It's not a question of where the building went. Nobody realized this. It's a question of where the workforce came to build the building. The contractor was from Martinez. He hired 2 minorities from Richmond, and he built a fire station. We got $178,000, the administration building, for nothing in the community. The day that the contractor made the 60% mark of minorities on building a building, the minorities were let go. 2 people from Martinez building. But that's how we got a free administration building. I mean, it was ridiculous, but we were there at the right time, at the right place. That was 1978. 1980 came along. That's the year it scared the hell out of everybody. It was called Prop 13. You know, the world was going to come to an end. We couldn't survive. And we felt the same way about it. We were very concerned that we were going to lose our paramedic service. And with Prop 13 coming up, so in the same election, we had to go for a paramedic election. I don't know how many of you remembered that. And when Prop 13 was overwhelming, went through with probably 85 or 90% of the people voting for cutting taxes, the community of Moraga had an 87% vote to raise taxes for the paramedic service. The politicians were flabbergasted. We ended up with our fire flow tax that since 1980 we've only used 5 times, 5 years out of since 1980. We probably next year go down to 1 penny. We're at 3.73 this year. And we are very grateful because that's made the paramedic service. I missed one area that I'm very embarrassed that I missed because I'm damn glad Gerry Meyer isn't here. 1977 was also the year we got the paramedics. We also had the Rescue One Foundation incorporate that year. This is a group of interested Moraga citizens. We lost one tonight. One of the original secretary of the group, Gerry Myers, several others, Gene Kurz, Julie Fisher, that wanted to support the Fire Service and the Paramedic Association. They've got the Rescue One Foundation, and that's available to anybody who wants to donate money to the Rescue One. All the money is used in the paramedic program. They do not solicit. They help put on our open house, so any of you went to our open house this year. And it's a great program, a great group of people. That came into effect in 1977. It's going strong. Very supportive group. They meet monthly. They bought the defibrillators that we're using. They upgraded defibrillators when they need to be upgraded. They bought cellular phones for the units because of our communication problems. We've always had direct communication by radio to our main hospitals, but we might as well let private industry do better for us, and a cellular phone gives us a better communication system. Right now, if you were to, we don't want you to have it, but should you have a medical emergency, let's say a heart attack, we put the defibrillator and the machines on you, and your EKG comes over showing your heart rate to the paramedic in front of you. It's tied into the cellular telephone, and the doctor at John Muir Hospital, we can see the exact same thing that paramedic does. And he decides what type of medication you should be given. Paramedic is just a doctor's hands. The paramedic cannot give any medication without that doctor's approval, with the one exception. That's if he's full of rest and he gets on the scene, he can put the big needle into you and try to get you started. But any type of medication that's needed to sustain you on the way to the hospital or to make your heart regular, the doctor sees the same thing the paramedic sees in front of him. He reads it back to the paramedic, and he says, do you see the same thing on your scope? Just double check. He says yes. Paramedic will read his readings on that. The doctor will tell what type of drugs that he may administer to you. Paramedic is a set of hands for the doctor. That's all he is. He's an extension of that doctor until you get to that emergency ward. And once a month minimum, we are bringing a person back. When I'm taking a person back, that's someone when we arrive on the scene that heart has stopped. And because of the combination of paramedics and the medical service at John Muir, Kaiser, Alpha Baitx, we are bringing these people back. And they come back and thank us. And that's the greatest feeling. Okay, that's where we went. 1980, we talked about Prop 13. We came through with an 87% yes vote, which is still sitting out there in the way of the tax rate. 1982, little politics. We had a fire commissioner by the name of Dick Olson, which is vice president of Transamerica Corporation, and it was a ball of fire. He felt we needed a ladder truck. The county didn't feel we needed a ladder truck. He was back in New York, got on the phone with the president of American La France, 1-to-1. 2 weeks later, we were in Seattle, Washington, buying a fire truck, a ladder truck. That ladder truck was bought with the intention in mind of the problems we have in Ascot Drive with the multiple apartments and so forth, and the major problems we have at St. Mary's College. Most people don't realize we have a 5-story structure at St. Mary's College, built in 1928. Last month on the 17th, it scared the hell out of me to go over there and see what we really had. To my surprise, the only damage we had that day of the earthquake at St. Mary's was the library. Those 1928 buildings were built like cast iron. They're standing, and the library was shook and came apart to some degree. But anyway, with the ladder truck that American LaFrance has bought for the college and apartment complexes that we have in the area, and all the commercial type buildings. It's, you'll see it probably run on 70% of the fires, because it's handy even up on a two-story building to get somebody up on the roof in a hurry. You don't have to extend the ladder up 75 feet, you can do it 25 feet, swing the ladder around and you're right there, manpower-wise. Things went fine, and things fell apart in 1986. That's when Skinner retired and Lucas became chief. Don retired in 1986, and I can't say enough for what he did for the fire service. He was the right man at the right time. He took a small department and made it into a very professional. He was there when we needed him. He was there when the paramedic service needed his backing. We were very fortunate to have the other assistant chief, John Cooper. That's his baby. He initiated that program. He's worked hard in that program, and it's grown, and he's grown. But we do miss Don. He doesn't miss the golf courses. 7 days a week he's playing golf. So, okay, I came aboard in '87. 1988, we had something interesting happen. You remember? You read in the papers, local municipal taxes went sky high. You couldn't buy public liability, property damage taxes for any municipality. We were paying at that time $1,300 a year earthquake insurance for both fire stations. We got a quote of $26,000 in 1 year. Again, Dick Olson, being the individual he is, he looked at it, he says, we're missing something here. I mean, he's in the insurance business. Transamerica Corporation owns their own insurance. He says, we're missing something here. He says, we don't want earthquake insurance. It's not going to do the community a damn bit of good for the insurance company to pay off 6 months later after the building's fallen down around the fire trucks. We have to earthquake-proof those buildings so the trucks will be available when we have the earthquake. And that year we spent $300,000 taking both stations and have them redone, totally earthquake-proof. The engine rooms, they were built with steel frames built into the wall, and I think it really paid off. Those things didn't even show a crack this time. Danville's got a major problem with their fire stations. You have to realize a fire station's a little different than a home. So lots of open spaces with very minimal support. It's large walls, high ceiling. And they were right. I mean, we spent $300,000+. Both stations were totally going through. And I think it started paying. We hope to hell we never have to prove how strong it is. But it's supposed to hold an 8.5 earthquake. And if it holds that, that's fine, because I don't think much is going to be standing after that anyway to protect. Okay. 88, we started, I mentioned it earlier, we started running the second paramedic unit out at the Rheem Station. That same year, we bought our training site. Few people are aware of it. We bought the property behind the Moraga Station, the old house, Gloria's old house. You've seen it's been painted, it's cleaned up a little. That's a future training site for Moraga Fire District. And we bought it as a future site, but things have changed. That is the site. We've taken the building, we're using it for training purposes now. Originally, the idea was to tear it down, a few years down the line, put a tower there. But we realized something right off the bat. We're going to get more training out of that structure than we will ever out of a tower. We don't fight training tower fires. We fight house fires. There's a house there. We've got smoke machines. We build our own fires without heat. We've got smoke machines to smoke that place up, and the people go on with air packs. They do all the evolutions that you would on a normal fire, except chop holes in the roofs. So we are going to use that for as long as that building will stand up, and we can repair it as a training site, and it's working out very well. So that was bought in 1988. 1989, what we have plans, January 1st, we will have 3 additional people on. So we'll have 30 firefighters out there. County's guaranteed to that. That brings us up to date, except a little statistics. And we'll give you 1988, we had a total of 936 runs, incidents. 185 of those were fires. 520 of those are EMS calls, emergency medical services. We aren't a fire department anymore, we're a public service agency, mainly medical. The other 231 were miscellaneous public calls, such as people locked out of cars, out of their homes, cat in a tree once in a while, we still do that. And there's a story behind that. You that know Al Baitx, and I know George does, and this is what Phyllis over there knew Al when he was around. You know, he'd give you the shirt off your back. But sometimes you get ornery as hell, too. And I'll never forget one day, the lady called, and he just didn't like her. My cat's stuck in a tree. He says, don't worry about it. He says, aren't you going to come out and get it? He says, hell no. Why won't you? He says, have you ever seen a skeleton of a cat in a tree? He says, it'll come down when it's hungry. So that really sums it up. I'm open for any questions. I've gone over it fairly quick. I don't know what else I can say. It's a great life. I've been there 30 years. Yes?
Your phone hook up with the EKG to
John
Muir. You have the same service to Alta Baitx and Kaiser?
No. We transport to Alta Baitx and Kaiser. I'll cover that real quick. The state law says if you're in a life or death situation, total arrest, or a major trauma case, you have to transfer it to the closest hospital, which means Kaiser Hospital. That's the closest one. But we can only have one base hospital, and it's John Muir, because all trauma cases go to John Muir now, so we can take trauma. But they are in direct communications with Kaiser. We transfer to John Muir or to Alta Baitx, depending on the conditions of Highway 24. That's a priority important thing. In the morning, I'm not going to take you to Alta Baitx, okay? I'll take you to Kaiser or John Muir. In the afternoon, to get going the other way, we'll end up over at Alta Baitx, the closest hospital's on a real trauma situation. Something else that we have that you'll probably see, and you're not aware what it does, on all of our units in Moraga and Orinda also, we've got an Opticom system. It's put out by 3M, and what that does, we control the stoplights in the community now. You'll see a strobe light. If you see a fire truck or an ambulance coming towards you with the lights on, you'll see a white strobe light. What that does is sends a signal to the stoplight. On top of each stoplight, you'll see a little gooseneck on one of the lights, not every one, and that's a receiver. And what that does, when that light hits that receiver, 3 seconds later, it'll go to yellow, and it'll go automatic green light. So right now, an ambulance leaving this place can get to John Muir Hospital without a red light. It goes through Moraga, through the town of Lafayette, down St. Mary's Road, First Street, 224, gets off Ignatia Valley Road, and all those lights are green for you all the way in. It was done for not only to protect the public, but to protect our insurance rating. We're self-insured. And, you know, that's where our liability, that's where we're hanging out on liability. Orinda's done the same thing. Walnut Creek and Lafayette Fire Departments are getting into the program now. It's a real safety factor. But we can save a couple minutes. What it also does, it keeps traffic moving, because between 17 and 2,300 feet ahead of the signal, it reads it. And that keeps the people moving in front of you. Hardest problem we have, especially on Ignatia Valley Road, you got a red light, and you got 30 cars behind you. You got an island down the middle, so you can't go around. You make a lot of noise and you sit there. With this system, you know, that's a quarter mile ahead. The light's already turned green, so the traffic's moving. When traffic's moving, it can move to the right. So it's made a big difference. Please, more questions? Yes.
Why does the fire engine go with the paramedic when you see the two go together?
For manpower. The paramedic unit has 2 people on it. The fire department has two to three more additional ones. What happens on that, let's say it was a total arrest, we will take one of our firefighters and put them in the ambulance, so you got a minimum of 2 people in the ambulance on an emergency for CPR and administering drugs and so forth, because one guy has to drive. So unless it's a minor situation, if we get a call and somebody says, my son's got a broken arm, most of the time it'll be just a 1-unit response, just the paramedics. But if it's in a school, lots of times they'll send them both. because you have someone that runs into problems. You want the extra people there. They're radio equipped, so they can turn around and go back if they're not needed, or they go somewhere else. That's the reason you see the fire truck at the Safeway store instead of just a pickup down there, because they're radio equipped. If there's an emergency, the firemen have the same thing I have on me. He goes in the store with the pager on. He hears all the communications, so he hears a call. He can get back and respond. The unique thing about that, if the fire truck's down at Safeway, the response time is better than from the fire station, because the guys are in the truck already. You know, we figure 30 seconds to put up from the time the phone rings to get a man in the truck started, the air pressure up, and so forth out the door.
Some of the people here might not realize that the man you saved by zapping 11 times
Yeah.
was a former president of the Moraga Historical Society.
When it was?
Glenn Chapman.
Yeah.